Members, it's time and we have a quorum. First item on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. Since the last meeting, the Secretariat circulated with members paper CB brackets 2462/19-20, Geographical constituency boundary maps in respect of the 2020 electoral general election. Members, please take note. Second item, items for discussion at the next meeting. For details, please refer to the list of outstanding items and list of follow-up actions. The next regular meeting will be held on the 17th of February at 2:30 p.m. The administration suggests the following discussion items, including 1. Administrative guidelines on promotion of racial equality and the work report of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data. Item number 3, review of the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. I now invite the administration in. With us today, we have Mr. Patrick Nip, Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Ms. Rosanna Law, Deputy Secretary, Mr. Jackie Lum, Principal Assistant Secretary, and from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data, Mr. Stephen Wong, Commissioner, and Ms. Clara Wong, Assistant Legal Counsel. And papers have been circulated with members. Before the meeting, we received submissions from 2 deputations, including Keyboard Frontline and Human Rights Watch. A copy of the submissions has been tabled for members' reference. I first invite the Secretary to walk us through the paper before we open up for questions. Thank you. Chairman, members, we provided a submission to the panel. We seek members' views on the review of the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, or PDPO. The government pays much emphasis to the importance of personal data privacy in light of major personal data privacy breaches in recent times. Together with the PCPD, we launched a review to look into amendments to the PDPO. And we are proposing a number of amendments, including introducing a mandatory data breach notification mechanism and to establish a notification timeframe, the powers of the PCPD, and revision of the definition of personal data privacy. And the recent incidents highlighted the importance of amending the PDPO, and we looked into the issue with a number of sectors, including the business sector, as well as IT sector, as well as consumer rights groups. We also made reference to relevant practices in jurisdictions like the EU and Australia, and the relevant amendment suggestions are carried in paragraphs 4 to 17. As apart from the amendment suggestions, the PCPD has been following up on cases of doxing. Currently, Cap 64 of the PDPO has stipulations on the unauthorized use of personal data information. The PCPD told us that there's room for improvement in relation to the treatment of doxing, including revisions to the relevant provisions to tackle cases of doxing, and the Commissioner should be empowered to remove contents of doxing, and as well as the powers of prosecution, etc. We are looking into the amendment of the ordinance with the PCPD, and we will also make reference to relevant jurisdictions in deciding the way forward for the ordinance. We hope to bring this matter to members And after we collect the views of members, we will follow up on the exercise. And when time is ripe, we will consult the views of the relevant stakeholders and the panel. And myself, my team, and the PCPD are happy to take questions. All other members of LegCo were invited to take part in the discussion of this item. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. We have 7 members so far. 4 minutes each, please, including question and answer. First up, Mr. Charles Mok. Thank you. I'm rather disappointed about the consultation exercise and the paper. The last time public consultation was conducted in 2009, the consultation document was over 100 pages and there was a lot of background information. But this time, you did not even mention public consultation. You only mentioned certain stakeholders, and we don't even know who they are. And you are only consulting them and LegCo members. This is insufficient, and I believe public consultation is needed. In terms of the mandatory data breach notification mechanism, this is something that has been discussed a long time ago. But what really constitutes a major risk or breach? This is still ambiguous. And there was an issue discussed at the last exercise, that is whether you would enhance the powers of the PCPD and whether he would be empowered to conduct investigation and prosecution. Otherwise, the PCPD would remain a powerless tiger. And another issue that was discussed at the last consultation exercise was the definition of personal data. You mentioned things like IP address and geolocation. What about the handling of sensitive data? This is a very important issue internationally. You talked about doxing, but apparently that is the only thing you care about. But we must be very careful in order to not jeopardize the work of the media. And as for the current gray areas, who would be enforcing the laws? I hope the PCPD would not only tackle doxing.
So you're proposing amendments selectively. And I have to look at what you refuse to do. You talk about EU's GDPR's new proposals, and there are so many new powers proposed, but most of them have not been mentioned here. There are long-standing problems, including Article 33 on transborder transfer of data. It's been 20 years on. You haven't handle it. How can we ensure that Hong Kong people's personal data will be transferred to other jurisdictions, including the mainland, for handling? So you have evaded all these, and also technological use and so on, face recognition, and also personal data profiling, automatic decision-making, AI, etc. All these issues are important and are discussed in detail in the GDPR, but then we're still lagging behind. And if you just do another consultation 10 years later, we will remain lagging behind. Whether it's the PCPD's prosecution, sanctioning power, technological issues, transborder, data transfer, and so on. You turn a blind eye to all these issues. Thank you, Mr. Mok, for your opinion. Mr. Mok raised a number of issues. Now, first of all, about public consultation. In the past, we would come up with a consultation document detailing the proposals, and then we will carry out consultation for 6 months or 3 months, and then we would collect thousands of views, and then we will come up with proposals. This time, we're not doing it this way. because that may not be the most effective way, because there has been a lot of concern in the society about major data breaches, and this has been discussed within the panel, and we agree that we would amend the legislation, and we've done some work, and we have talked to the stakeholders who have helped us clear our directions forward. So I'm suggesting the way forward in terms of the directions of the amendment. So if you agree with these proposed directions, or you raise certain views on our proposed directions, then please give us your views so that we can go further into how the provisions should be amended. And after the draft provisions have been made, we will collect views from different stakeholders, and then we can come to the LegCo to seek amendment of the ordinance. So this is the way we go about it, and I hope that Mr. Mark is clear about this. Now, second thing about the PCPD's powers. We have mentioned this in the paper in terms of major data breaches. In our proposed amendments, we are asking whether the PCPD should be given the power to mete out administrative penalty. And in terms of doxing, we have also asked whether the PCPD should be given powers to carry out criminal investigation and prosecution. This has been discussed in the last review, and the subject is quite controversial. So I hope to hear your views on this. Last but not least, on doxing, as set out in the paper, well, this is not our major objective in amending the legislation. Now, there have been doxing incidents, and that trigger our exercise in amending the law. And in the past 7 months, there has been extensive doxing, and that's a cause of concern in the society. So we must protect the personal data in that regard, and we would review the legislation so that amendments can be made to further strengthen protection. Mr. Lam Cheuk Ting. Chairman? Concerning the question of doxing, the government is very concerned about it. The police officers and their members, family members and public officers and so on, those supporting or objecting the government have been doxed in terms of their personal data. So the public officers and their family members have been doxed. My wife, my dad and mom-in-law, and so on, they have been doxed on the internet, and they have been harassed. So this is something we must tackle head on. Another very serious issue is that uniformed public police officers are discharging their duties repeatedly are searched for identity cards of the media representatives. And during the direct broadcast, the police officer concerned displayed in front of the camera the identity card showing the face of the person, the ID card number, date of birth, etc. Well, this police officer is acting in a most lawless way and has total disregard of the law. And the PCPD has issued a statement on that incident. You have followed up. But then after the press statement, it seems that the police officers have not been deterred. You said that you are going to amend the ordinance. For such kind of behavior in the future, would you be able to reprimand the officer immediately or issue a warning to the head of department saying that this is going against the PDPO and this must be stopped immediately? Will you remind the police that police officers should not display people's identity card in front of the camera in exercising their duties? Will the authority do it? Would you be writing to the police commissioner to remind him that the police officers should not repeatedly breach the PDPO? Because there are law enforcement agencies, they shouldn't do that. Mr. Lam Cheuk Ting referred to doxing. That's been a problem, and people from different backgrounds have been affected, irrespective of your political stance. And we must strengthen protection, privacy protection for the people affected. So hence the need to amend the ordinance. So I hope that you can give us more views on the specific provisions to be amended. Now, next, on police officers discharging their duties, displaying the ID card information of certain individuals. Now, on this particular incident, the police force has already given an account, and they're going to follow up. And the PCBD has responded and will follow up. And if there are complaints against police officers who are discharging their duties, there is an established mechanism to follow up on that. So we will have to be, we have regard to the individual circumstances, but it's not deterrent at all. The police officers have disregarded the PCPD's statement repeatedly. They have displayed or shown the ID card of the person investigated into. People cannot refuse to let public officers collect their identity card. So it's not deterrent at all. So, Commissioner, can you respond to that, please? Last night, I responded to questions of the media. This case is a bit different. Now, in the typo supermarket, that was a case, and we would treat the current case similarly as that one in typo. The police have clarified that there is no live broadcast, and I have only read that that was so in the media reports. So we are now investigating into the matter, and I can't comment on the case in detail. We have done a lot of education and publicity apart from enforcing the law. And we would communicate more with public bodies and private organizations. We would issue more guidelines to them. I was asking whether a letter would be written to the police to remind them not to do so again. In our follow-up work, we would remind the police. We have done so last time. Ms. Tanya Chan, I have a question for the Commissioner. How's your follow-up work, apart from writing to them? Well, in particular, on the case in Typo, Megamall, what have the police done? Now, you have written to the police. Have they given you a reply? And the Secretary, have you tried to understand the matter personally? But the police gave a very good answer yesterday. They said they didn't wear the press vest, and even if they did, then they suspected that this is fake. And well, at least the members of the press are wearing a press badge themselves, and they said that they could not ascertain whether they are indeed members of the press, and so on and so forth. Now, this happened soon after the typo incident, and the situation seems not to have improved. So, Commissioner, what action have you taken? Have you taken very strong action and then you disregarded, or what is happening? Commissioner, we're not at liberty to tell you the details of the action, but what we've done is that on the following day, we've written to the police force, and we have asked questions in accordance with our established mechanism and asked them for answers. And we have received some responses. And more internal investigation is entailed afterwards. So please bear with us. We are now into it, investigating it. Secretary, how would you see the matter? Do you think the complaint mechanism is effective? It seems the same incident, a similar incident happened so soon after. So do you think it's an ideal situation? In the social unrest in the past few months, there are many different cases of breaches of privacy. Now, what is most important is first, you must abide by the law, and if similar incidents happen, the commissioner will follow up in accordance with the established mechanism. And if police officers are involved, the police have said they would deal with the matter in accordance with the established mechanism. And complaints can also be handled in accordance with the established mechanism. Now, we didn't see this happening in the past. And so in terms of public education, in terms of the commissioner's powers, is there any room for improvement? If yes, then we might have to amend the law, and we will consult legislators on this. And then we will have to strike a balance among different interests of different parties. Secretary, is not we are lacking public education. It's a lack of education on the part of the police officers. They don't know how to respect personal data privacy. I have handed you my identity card. I'm wearing a press badge, and then you are showing the identity card in front of the camera. Do you think it's reasonable? So police officers may ask you for an ID card, and then they just put it up in front of the camera. Do you think that's acceptable? The police officer have given a very clear account of the incident which happened previously, and they are going to follow up on it. And in the law enforcement process, they will be abiding by the legal provisions when they discharge their duties. Well, this thing happened again 1 month or so later. As to what happened yesterday, I believe the Privacy Commissioner will follow up, and we would try to understand what it's all about, and we will follow up accordingly. Next, Mr. Martin Liao. Chairman, the PCPD said in the past that there is a need to be given to have more power so that they can be conferred the power to directly investigate and prosecute, and they should be given the power to issue injunctions. The government said that such powers should not be given to the PCPD. And the government paper said that they would more specifically address doxing problems and will confer on the commissioner statutory powers to request the removal of doxing contents from social media platforms or websites, as well as the powers to carry out criminal investigation and prosecution. I think you are being expedient in proposing this.
This would enhance the protection of personal data in the violent clashes arising from the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance. Lots of police officers and their families were doxed, and they were subject to abuse and nuisance, and they have had to live in fear. The government intends to deal with or tackle doxing by way of amending the legislation. But could the exercise be finished within the current term? Government, this is still an unknown. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice and Commissioner of Police obtained a court injunction prohibiting the disclosure of personal data of police officers and their families. But has the government do an adequate job in protecting the public officers from doxing? Would the public information of public officers lead to doxing? And as far as the government knows, how many public officers have been subject to doxing? The paper talked about the time frame of notification as well as notification threshold. If there is a real risk of significant harm, the PCPD must be informed or notified within a certain time frame. Will the government issue relevant guidelines so that data users can have something to follow, or would they have to make a decision based on their own circumstances? The notification can be served by way of email, fax, or post, but since instant messengers are very popular nowadays, some brokers receive instructions or transaction instructions from their clients through instant messengers. So can the relevant apps be used as a means of notifying the PCPD? And this might be a better channel than means such as fax or post. Thank you for the questions. The first question was about doxing and how the ordinance can be amended to enhance the protection. The commissioner's power to investigate and prosecute was something already discussed in the past. And we believe that if the commissioner is empowered, he can more effectively and efficiently deal with the relevant complaints. As for the injunction order issued by the court, a lot of public information is available about the government or government offices, and earlier prohibitions were laid by the courts through an injunction order, and I invited the relevant government departments to review the information they make public. The key is about the purpose of the data, and the use of such data should reflect such means. If the use goes beyond the need, then a review must be conducted. At the marriage register, measures are in place to ensure that any third-party inspections are in line with the purpose of the open data. And other departments will conduct similar reviews in order to enhance the relevant safeguards while striking a balance. And in case of major breaches of personal data, in terms of the notification threshold and timeline, like what we suggested in the paper, a specific time frame would be stipulated. That way, the relevant body would have the time to find out what has happened. So notifications should be served as soon as practicable and under all circumstances no more than 5 business days. And this is in line with international practice. We hope to take in views on whether this is appropriate. As for the mode of notification, instant messaging services are available, but in terms of the proper notification channels, email might be the best channel. But in some cases, telephone or other immediate means could be convenient or appropriate channels as well. Commissioner, anything to add? The use of instant messaging as a means of notification is something we can look at. The current practice is voluntary notification, and if we are alerted to a major breach, we will get in touch with the relevant body as soon as possible, and we would offer to provide assistance in order to limit the scope of the breach. And we would first discuss remedial action, and we would require the relevant body to fill out a notification form. And apart from considering instant messaging as a possible means of notification, the use of channels such as email or post would be appropriate or effective channels as well. Dr. Priscilla Leung, I have two follow-up questions. In May, I moved a motion to request improvement on the powers of summons and investigation for the PCPD. A few years ago, the personal data of some 3.7 million electors were leaked, but in the aftermath, was anyone prosecuted, and were any administrative sanctions slapped? And in Qingyi, the personal data of a further 8,000 electors were lost. It was simply incredible. And the elector particulars of the chief executive was also lost. And we also saw that in some cases, the police officers were doxed within a very short time, and their particulars were made available within a very short time. So could it be inside jobs? What about the personal data of some 3.7 million people who was in possession of such data? Were the suggestions from the government and yourself sufficient? And last year, I offered a number of suggestions. I'd like to see your view on this. If the proposals are inadequate, we can follow up further. As for the loss of a computer in the past chief executive election, we follow up on that. And we got in touch with relevant staff, and there was appropriate follow-up work. Were any prosecutions laid with regards to the loss? The case was reported to the police, but there was no follow-up work. We did not receive any updates in the aftermath. There was no evidence to that pointed at a personal data leak. As for the loss of the register, the REO conducted an investigation and made recommendations. And in the recent district council elections, those recommendations were adopted on the storage and handling of the registers. While the personal data were lost, so who ended up with those data? Were anyone prosecuted? And were there any safety concerns? You cannot just say that there is no disclosure, because the data ended up in the hands of some unknown people, and you are telling us that there are no blind spots in terms of security. So how can we be convinced? After that incident, the police followed up on the case, and I did not receive further updates on whether anything was identified. Would you like us to follow up on the proposals? Thank you very much. All along, Dr. Leung has expressed her concerns, and she offered some recommendations last May. Paragraph 3 of the paper mentioned the purpose of reviewing the ordinance, that is to keep with the times. Since personal data breaches are so commonplace nowadays, from facial recognition, personal identification, etc., there's a need for us to move with the times. In the recent 6 months, the personal data privacy breaches show that in terms of the powers of the commissioner to conduct investigation and enforce the laws, the powers might be inadequate. That's why we hope to do more. Personal data privacy is a basic human right. And as such, we hope to strike a balance with other forms of human rights. So there is a legitimate goal to our amendment exercise. If the amendments are passed, would the restrictions on other forms of human rights be proportionate and appropriate for any enforcement agency? Of course, we want to avoid redundancy in work. We want to enhance the efficiency and cost effectiveness of or value for money of our work. It's about protecting personal data. So the public hopes that the work can be expedited. For cases of doxing, information can spread rapidly online, and this is bad news for anyone. So we would have to look at local and global trends. So the 6 areas we mentioned in the paper are actually in line with the considerations of the government. If any improvement is warranted, we are happy to take in views, and we would look into them with experts and international stakeholders. Thank you.
Dr. Cheng Chung-dai, Chairman. So whether it's the Secretary's comments and also the paper, I find them very outrageous. How can you deal with data breaches together with doxing? I think you come with the wrong starting point. These are 2 separate issues. Data breaches may involve a negligence on the duty on the part of the government. There have been so many examples in the past. The REO has been involved in 2 major incidents. Individual government departments, including the case referred to by Ms. Priscilla Leung, the mishandling of data at the Qingyi polling station, and so on. I think it has to do with the mismanagement on the part of the government staff members. And the secretary said that the cases have been reported to the police. They have passed the buck to the police. I have asked this many times. How was the police's follow-up like? And then data breaches have to do with security loopholes of private organizations, whether there is a problem with the management of private organizations. I don't think we have to lecture private organizations on those. Some 9 million passengers' personal data have been leaked by Cathay Pacific. You have not responded to it. And also the CE's credit information has been leaked. And then for e-banking, there have been problems in the past few years. You haven't responded to it, and you have done nothing at all. In the past 6 months, you said because of doxing, and it's an urgent issue, and you have to amend the law. So why don't you work on a piece of legislation on stalking as well? I wonder whether the legal advisor of the LegCo has anything to add. I don't come from the legal background myself, but how can doxing be included under the ambit of the PDPO? There have been so many examples of burglary and so on and so forth. There have been so many evil laws in Hong Kong today. PDPO is to protect the personal data of individuals against the abuse or mismanagement by public bodies and government departments and private organizations. You haven't done amendment for a long time, and now you are asking that legislation be worked on for doxing. A lot of legislators have been doxed in the past, too. We are public figures, and we expect that the line for us will be quite blurred. But then you said police officers are not like us. Then that might have to do with whether the complaint mechanism against the police officers is transparent enough. It's a problem with public bodies, government departments, private organizations. And then in the past week, people of different political backgrounds, I'm talking about Cathay Pacific. The whole crew's personal data have been uploaded onto the web. I wrote to the PCPD to ask for a formal investigation. You said that you have received my letter. So how is the progress of your follow-up? So has Cathay Pacific breached the PDPO? If you don't give me answers on these questions, what's the point of amending the law? Secretary, Dr. Chang referred to a number of issues. The first one, the paper sets out 2 issues to be tackled. First is major data breaches. And that leads us to question whether we should put in place a mandatory notification mechanism. And then the second issue has been doxing, which has happened or rampant in the past few months. And it has to do not only with police officers and their family members, but also other members of the society. So these are 2 issues. For the first issue, government departments and business organizations are sometimes involved in data breaches. And those affected would like to know or would like to be notified if their personal data have been breached. So is a notification mechanism necessary? What is the threshold and the time frame, etc.? So if we want to strengthen protection in that regard, amendments have to be made. Sorry, I know that time is limited. I would like an answer from the Commissioner. I've told you that Cathay Pacific crew's personal data has been leaked, and obviously people have contravened the PDPO and then make public the entire crew's personal data. Don't talk to me about the notification mechanism. Just give me an answer on the question I raised. Let me finish first. On doxing. Now, so because of data breaches, and then we need a notification mechanism. And if we do that without talking about the doxing in the past 7 months, you would be accusing me of being out of touch with reality. So that's why I have to raise the issue of doxing so that I can hear members' views on this as well. Over to you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Dr. Chang, for your question. I have noticed what's happening, and I've made an explanation at public occasions. When we receive a complaint, we will investigate immediately. As of now, I haven't received any complaint from the person involved in the incident. We only learn about the incident through media reports. We don't have sufficient evidence. to ascertain the severity of the incident, to proactively investigate into the incident. So we are still waiting for a formal complaint. Dr. Zhang gave us a referral. He was not the person involved. So I don't have any legal ground to immediately start the investigation upon receipt of his letter. But I can undertake that we would closely follow up on the matter. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Chairman, we need to amend the PDPO. That's not, we don't dispute that. I think the ordinance is lagging far behind now. And for Section 33 of the ordinance, that has all along been not implemented. It's been some 20 years, and Mr. Charles Mock has said that clearly, and we agree that to the point made by this Human Rights Watch, and Section 33 prohibits the transfer or casual transfer of personal data to places outside Hong Kong, and unless certain conditions are met, and these conditions are reasonable. But in the past 2 decades, the section has not been implemented because the government refused to give an implementation date. And the government said that there have been a lot of concerns in the business sector. The definition is not clear, and it is a globalized world, and it's difficult to implement the provision. In 2014, the PCPD issued some guidelines to explain places which appear to be arbitrary and unclear. And in 2015-16, the government engaged a consultant to conduct a business impact assessment, i.e., the impact on the business if that provision is implemented. And 7 concerns were raised after that. And then the PCBD also engaged a consultant to look into how such concerns should be responded to. That was done in 2018. Now it's 2020. And the consultant have addressed those 7 concerns, and they said that even if there are these concerns, the provision can still be brought into force. Let's not talk about the amendment of the law now. Do you have any timetable to enforce Section 33? Because one of our greatest concern is that whether our personal data will be casually transferred to the north across the border. This is the greatest concern. You talk about Greater Bay Area development and so on. You ask people, or you urge people to develop in the mainland. But for our personal data, it seems that we are not protected at all. So it's been some 20 years. Do you have a timetable to implement this provision, which was written or drafted some 20 years ago? Secretary, thank you, Dr. Zhang, for your question. Dr. Zhang referred to Section 33 and when it will be brought into force, and you have talked about the work that we've done, including the guidelines issued by the PCPD and the work of the consultant. The commissioner is still working with the consultant on work, and after the consultant is finished with his work, we will chart the way forward. Perhaps I'll defer to the commissioner to elaborate. We are now working on it at the PCPD. Together with the consultants, we are working on 2 templates, and we will provide the same to the business organizations, and we are doing that in response to their concerns. The first template is about cross-border data transfer between organizations in one place and another. And then the second is on the data processes, for example, cloud data processes, and how they should transfer data. So template is being prepared in that regard. We would like to issue simple to understand guidelines. We will also provide best practices guidelines, especially for the SMEs. All this work can hopefully be completed in the first half of this year, and we would be sharing this with the recommendations with the Secretary. You haven't answered me. You talk about guidelines, consultants' reports, and templates. I am asking about the time frame. When will you implement or bring into force Section 33, which was drafted some 20 years ago, which has to do with protecting Hong Kong people's personal data against arbitrary transfer outside of Hong Kong? Timetable. Secretary, I have talked about the fact that the work is ongoing and the issues that are being considered. And once the PCBD has completed its work, we will review the situation. We don't have a timetable now. So he is filibustering, right? So he has answered your question, right? Next one, Mr. Raymond Chan. Chairman, of course, we support reviewing the PDPO. The Commissioner and the government said all the time that we should embark on public education so that they know the importance of protecting personal data, and people's sensitivity can also be raised. I think what education should be done not just among public, but also the public officers, and in particular the public, the law enforcers. Internally, have you educated frontline law enforcers on the importance of protecting personal data? Are they well aware of the personal data? And some people have reflected to me that their personal data have been leaked by the police, and their medical records have been transferred by the police to the media even. So if this is really found out to be true, do you have laws to regulate such behavior, i.e., law enforcers leaking personal data to the media? If not, then can you draw up legislation to cope with that? There are so many examples. On the 21st of September, in reclaiming Tumun operation, a 28-year-old man was arrested, and the police found a medical record, a follow-up consultation card on him. And how has it got to do with the incident? And then the police told the media the information on the medical record, and the media were let to know that this person is suffering from AIDS. And they said that if the person was found bleeding during the course of arrest, they should be more alert because the person was suffering from AIDS. And the police deliberately told the media this piece of information. So how is illegal assembly got to do with the AIDS situation? And then the condoms and contraceptives, etc., were also found on the person's body. So if not for the police, the media would not know about this.
If public officers purposely disclose the personal data or medical history of an arrestee, would it be a breach of the ordinance? And do you think that such personal data should be safeguarded? Chairman, I would offer a brief response before I defer to the Commissioner. In the past 7 months, we saw that different information were circulated among different groups, and different people were subject to leaks of personal data, so we should not target any specific groups. So, of course, it was the police who leaked the information. We would refer to the legal requirements, and we should respect privacy. This is the collective goal of our community. Commissioner, I have nothing much to add because according to the laws, anyone, regardless of background and color, must comply with our ordinance. So in our enforcement work, we have all along been impartial. we would enforce the laws in an impartial manner, regardless of the background of anyone. I'm not looking for a generic answer like that. My question was, is it a breach to disclose the medical history of someone? Anyone who openly discloses information that is not in line with the purpose of collecting information, the consent of the data subject must be obtained. That is the principle, but there are exceptions according to the law. For instance, for crime investigation and detection purposes, data collection and survey, etc., we would look at the legal principles and we would examine whether any exceptions are warranted. Can the relevant victims seek help from you? For example, the people who had their medical history disclosed, the answer is yes. Dr. K.K. Kwok. I have no problems with your suggestion of conducting a review, but in terms of law enforcement, you mentioned that the body must disclose the breach proactively, but in reality this is difficult because in some cases they are not even aware of a breach. For the penalty levels, for example, the level 3 and level 5 fines, they are way too light. As for the breach of the PDPO by enforcement agencies, like other members said, some police officers disclose the ID of reporters on camera, and it took place more than once. And in recent days, a police officer was doxxed after he was found updating a lantern wall. For many of the ordinances or regulations, you are relying on the police to enforce them. But with their credibility at rock bottom, and 70% of the Hong Kong people have zero confidence in the police, if you ask the police to oversee their own work, it is simply a waste of time because there will not be any credibility. For cases involving the public or people who dox the police, they would certainly, these cases would certainly be tackled by the police. But in terms of the disclosure of ID card information of the reporters or doxing of their own officers, the current ordinance is inadequate. Regardless of the conclusions the Privacy Commissioner came up with, the police would always cite operational needs. And apparently this is the overarching priority, and that would take priority over anything else. The police has ignored different regulations, including the PDPO. Does the government have any ways to get around this problem? If not, how can you convince the public? In that case, how can you convince different bodies to comply with the latest amendments under the PDPO? I would take the first part of the question. Currently, there's no mandatory data breach notification mechanism, and upon investigation, the PCPD can only issue an enforcement notice requesting rectification. For bodies that are not aware of the breach, there's nothing they can do, but if they know of any data breach, it must be reported within a specific time frame. That way, the harms caused to impacted individuals can be minimized. As for the issue of doxing and the relevant proposed amendments, we hope to improve the safeguards and prevent instances of doxing, and this would apply to all affected individuals. For the details, I would defer to the Privacy Commissioner. Thank you. One of the key objectives to our amendments is to empower the Privacy Commissioner with the power to investigate, especially for criminal cases. The Commissioner will enjoy full investigation powers, and he will also be vested with the power to prosecute. Of course, it is still up to the Secretary for Justice in deciding whether or not to lay prosecutions. If we believe that criminal investigations are warranted, that is, if crimes are involved and the admissibility of evidence must be considered before the court's collection of evidence, etc., we currently face certain difficulties. And since some of the procedures are redundant, we would sometimes waste valuable time, and we are currently unable to contain the extent of the harm due to the time wasted. In terms of confidence, this is not something that we can do by way of legislation, but we would attempt to do something about the powers of the PCPD in order to tackle some of the shortcomings exposed in the recent episodes. I cited some examples, including breaches by police officers. Is there nothing that can be done apart from the amendments? When can the amendments be implemented? Currently, there are no answers. The government has to rely on, well, you have to rely on the police, and you know very well that people have no confidence in the police. And before the amendments are implemented, you still have to rely on the police and DOJ. So the work is currently very difficult. You are correct about that. Basically, you are a toothless tiger, but and these powers would not have retrospective effect. So many of the outstanding cases would not be followed up upon. Today, we are taking in the views of members before we draft the wording of the amendments. I will draw the line very soon. So if members wish to speak, please press the button. Mr. Holden Chow. The paper talked about some overseas jurisdictions, and some jurisdictions have administrative fines in place. At recent times, we saw cases of doxing. Police officers and their family members were subject to doxing, and in some cases, cyberbullying. My question is, well, the PCPD has the power to deal with these cases, but in terms of slapping additional administrative fines, if you know that a certain body does not adequately protect personal data or even lead to doxing or cyberbullying, would imposing an administrative fine actually prevent cyberbullying and doxing? I'd like to hear from the government. Commissioner, please. For doxing cases involving data uses, we would start with the data protection principles. This is about the collection and use of open data. If the principle, well, even if the principle is breached, it is not a crime. So the administrative fines would be effective to an extent. For doxing of a criminal nature, and that is, for example, uploading of personal data online, leading to or inflicting mental harm on the data subjects. Currently, it is very hard to identify the culprits since they do not have to provide their real names online. In recent months, we identified about 17 online platforms. Every time we ran into these cases, we would write to them and we requested them not to facilitate such acts, and they are asked to take down such content. And that is why the court issued an injunction order for some platforms. They removed 70% of the doxing content, and of which 40% of the cases involved police officers. In light of the severity of the breaches, cases from overseas, and the sense of responsibility, we hope the relevant data users would take action. For platforms in Hong Kong, the contents were fully removed, and the current challenge is with the overseas platforms. And that is why we are proposing amendments to the ordinance in order to identify the culprits of doxing, and we hope to regulate the online platforms involved as well. I agree that identifying the culprits is of great importance. For the online platforms that facilitate the doxing, they should be imposed with administrative fines. That is the easiest and most effective answer. Next, Ms. Helena Wang.
I would like to hear from the Commissioner. In the past 6 months, it was reported that the police have accessed 3,721 phones of those arrested, and a lot of them have not been notified, and no court warrant has been issued. And there was a case that the police claimed that the search warrant has been obtained, and that was for searching the smartphones detained at the police station. So one warrant covers all the smartphones, and they haven't even asked for the password for the from the phone owners. Maybe they have resorted to some ransomware from Russia and so on and so forth. So the personal data of the smartphones in those arrested be protected. So if the police don't have a warrant, should they be prohibited from accessing the smartphones? Commissioner, I tried to answer this question. I don't have much information. Whether personal data are within the smartphones, yes, the answer is in the affirmative. An international organization said that your phone is the device which discloses largest amount of personal data from you. Now, as to how the police will handle equipment or devices seized, we will have to look at the circumstances of the individual cases. We have to accept the fact that the police do have the authority to do searching and to collect evidence, including that from smartphones. So without knowing the actual circumstances, it's inappropriate for me to make any comment. So, Commissioner, would you, on behalf of those arrested, try to understand from the police as to under what circumstances would the police be allowed to obtain information, access information from the phones of the arrested persons, even if they have not obtained the court warrant and they haven't notified the data subjects either? Now, the principle of the DPO is that we should strive to best protect the personal data privacy and have the duty to review from time to time whether that objective can be achieved. In law enforcement actions and in preventing crimes, there is an exemption in relation to collection of personal data for those purposes. Even if they breach the PDPO, they are allowed to do so under that exemption. Do you mean that the police can breach the law? No. Is that if they try to detect crimes and prevent crimes, they are allowed to do certain things. Now, whether they really need to do that, we have to look at the actual circumstances of the individual cases. We cannot make general comments as to what the police can or cannot do. And we have to accept the fact that the police are given the mandate to maintain law and order, and we have to trust that they can do everything in accordance with the law. Well, the problem is that the members of the public don't trust the police, and they don't know whether their information has been obtained by the police and whether their data have been transferred to the mainland. When you review the ordinance, please try to understand this, whether the personal data have been transferred to the mainland. So we would look at this. Now, for individual cases, they are now sub judice, so I am not going to comment on them. Ms. Claudia Mo. So everyone should be equal before the law, but sometimes it's more difficult to protect the privacy of certain individuals, like the stars and public celebrities and the paparazzi from the media would be following you all the time. But then in Hong Kong, the case is on the reverse. Strangely, police officers are worried whether they will be doxxed. Well, doxing, of course, is not right. But we have to look at the causes and the impact of certain incidents. The Secretary said that we should not be targeting certain individuals in our discussion or individual groups. And the Commissioner said that law covers everyone. Of course, we know that the law is applicable to all. But it seems the police are particularly protected now. The government has to had sought an injunction order from the court prohibiting doxing of police officers. So can a member of the public go to the court to seek an injunction against doxing? Say, can a lawyer, an accountant do that? Well, it's possible, because the government has taken the lead to do something so strange. So this is my view, and I don't need a response from you. But if you have time, do respond. Second, I would like to put this question to the Commissioner of what happened on August the 31st at Prince Edward Station. The MTRC said that it's possible for them to disclose their CCTV footage because it will go against the PDPO. Say, if there are footages showing clear images of individuals, they can cover those up. Now, if in the footage the MTRC tried to blur the faces or cover the faces of the individuals, they should be able to show the footages, right? I find it very strange that the MTRC has all along refused to disclose the CCTV footages of what happened inside Prince Edward Station. Secretary, well, my question is for the Commissioner. I don't have much time. Commissioner, on the 31st of August incident, Commissioner? Well, let me give you a general reply here. Installation of recording devices at certain places, and under what circumstances can the footages be disclosed? Generally, if the footages, or including the audio recordings, can identify the identity of certain individuals, and the purpose then is for maintaining security and law and order, and if the subsequent use is not related to public order and security, then that's not right. So if the data is not used for a purpose for which it is collected, then the data subject's consent has to be obtained. But then, as I said, if we're talking about detecting crimes and prevention of crimes, these are exemptions, and so such data can be disclosed. These are the general principles. Now, there is a common way of getting around it is trying to cover up the face of the individuals, and that is an acceptable approach, because the definition under the definition of our ordinance, if that is done, then the person's identity cannot be ascertained. So MTRC can actually disclose the footages as long as the certain faces have been covered up. All right. Well, it goes back to the principles. I'll chase after the MTRC then. Dr. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Chairman. The review of the PDPO should have been done a long time ago, and I have raised at the Council many times that this ordinance is lagging far behind with the booming of the internet and the use of computer technology and so on. The PDPO is not just even a toothless tiger. It really serves no useful purpose. And in recent past, we've seen a lot of infringes of personal data privacy. Doxing is something set out in the paper today, but it is not clear as to how we will deal with this ahead to handle this situation. Doxing is not just on the internet. Doxing is found everywhere, on the walls of streets, and police officers' information has been posted up on the streets and the walls, and also members of the public's personal data have been posted on the streets. I find this very strange. People are allowed to do that, and they can do that even for several months without them being cleared by the government departments. I have lodged complaints with government departments who has not done anything yet about this. So I would like to ask the Commissioner, if someone posts such a notice or information on the wall, if he is arrested, of course he will be held liable. And we've asked government departments to deal with this, but then they refuse to do so. So does it mean that the government departments are betting these culprits to infringe on people's personal data privacy? Commissioner, thank you. I'd like to first thank Dr. Quat for encouraging our work at various occasions and supporting our work all along. For the doxing cases in the recent past, well, let's just not talk about merely online doxing. Offline doxing is also rampant, and people's personal data have been disclosed, and this is going against the provisions. We have to deal with that and regulate that as well. Maybe it's not yet a criminal offense, but then it causes mental harm to the person involved. We do have difficulties in tackling that. Whether it's the Lenin Wars or on the notices, well, seldom do we find the names of the persons and the addresses of the persons. And we have taken a look at what's happened, and we find it very hard to handle it. All we can do is just remove it. But then we don't have the power to remove such memo strips. So all we can do is ask for other government departments to help. We have received complaints. In that regard, we have received some 4,000 complaints about notices on Lenin Wars, and we are following up on individual cases. That helps. But we can't remove all the posters at one go. Chairman, say on the internet, if there are websites where doxing content is included, then the PCBD will notify the websites to remove them. Now, at Lenin Wars, they are actually installed within LCSD venues and also government premises, and some of them are set up at links venues and private organizations, buildings, and so on. So should the PCPD ask the owners of such premises to remove the Lenin Wall? If not, then they are contravening the PDPO. Can I answer first about posting such notices on premises managed by Highways Department and so on and so forth? And a lot of government departments are removing such notices. And I noticed that after these posted memos have been removed, people put them up quickly again. Commissioner, please. I would like to apologize to Dr. Kwok. I haven't done enough. I should do more. I need more manpower. We have to do a lot more patrolling and inspections to ascertain the real situation. And if there are complaints received, we will notify the relevant owners and managers. So members of the public can make a complaint to the PCPD that government departments are not removing such post-its. So the commissioner can ask them to remove them, right? Yes, that will help us a lot. 2 members have pressed the button to speak for a second round, and Mr. Charles Mok has moved one motion, and we have to deal with that.
Mr. Charles Mok and Dr. Fernando Chung, 3 minutes each, including question and answer, and then we would deal with the next item on the agenda. Mr. Charles Mok. Chairman, thank you for allowing us to speak for the second time. Two deputations made submissions before the meeting, and the Human Rights Watch submission reflected international interest over our situation. It shows that a lot of businesses and the international business community care about the situation as well. In terms of GDPR, many local and global companies ask about it, and they wonder whether they would be punished or how they can do even better. I hope our discussion today would not only be about political matters at home. It is very important to catch up with international standards, and I agree with many of the things they said, including the widening of the definition of personal data, the inclusion of sensitive personal data, the importance of obtaining consent from individuals, that is, whether individuals agree to have their data shared, a broader definition is warranted. And the submission also discussed the cross-border data transfer. And the ordinance lacks an enforcement date, so I won't go into too much detail. I just want to say that these are very important. It's not just about protecting the personal data privacy of Hong Kong people, and we are not just making regulations of personal data. In the future, the commissioner might need to be renamed as Commissioner for Personal Data in line with international practice. Secretary, please. Thank you very much. We will look into the proposals in detail in our amendment exercise. Next, Dr. Fernando Chang. Chairman, I'd like to thank Keyboard Frontline and Human Rights Watch for making submissions, and we agree with their views. Human Rights Watch mentioned one point which I agree with. That is, they observe that so long as the police request transfer of data from other government departments, they will not be subject to any restraints, and the other government departments will provide the personal data as requested. There are no open guidelines at all in this regard, and there are no standard procedures either. I like to hear the views of the Secretary and Privacy Commissioner in light of the serious clashes between the public and the police. And there has been a lot of doxing from both sides. And given the low public confidence in the police, or regardless of public confidence, there should have been principles and guidelines on the transfer of personal data. So is some work warranted? As for sensitive personal data, this has not been mentioned in your amendment exercise, especially biometrics, facial recognition, and DNA. We know that the mainland are collecting such data in mass. The same goes for Hong Kong. And like Mr. Mok and I said, there's no implementation timeline for Section 33 as indicated by the Secretary. So such data transfer could be very dangerous for Hong Kong people because we do not know how the data would be used. And in the mainland, there are social credit systems that govern the daily living, commutes, purchase of properties, or even employment and study for the people. So should these be included in the scope of review? Secretary, Dr. Chang talked about the police, and I believe that as an enforcement agency, the police would detect and investigate crimes, and as such, they must have sufficient powers to facilitate their work. Meanwhile, it's equally important to strike a balance in personal data privacy. As for the other views, we would consider those views in the amendment exercise. Would the Commissioner like to add anything? Privacy Commissioner. In terms of safeguarding personal data privacy, one of the objectives of the PDPO is that, well, we must accept that personal data belongs to the individual. So the protection of data is about individuals. It's about the collection of and storage as well as application of personal data and the power to amend as such. And these are governed in the current ordinance. The European Union has highlighted certain areas such as consents for sensitive personal data. Consents must first be sought. Express consents must be given by the data subject. As for the police obtaining information, I believe enforcement agencies around the world would obtain a lot of data out of operational needs. So the question is, how can safeguards be provided? According to the ordinance, if information or data is to be sought without consent, then it must be a statutory exemption. Enforcement agencies must provide reasonable grounds and evidence. The case is similar to obtaining a warrant from the courts, and certain steps must be taken to prove that obtaining such information is legitimate and reasonable. If we are to provide express provisions, that would be somewhat redundant because this is a cornerstone of any society that plays by the rule of law. We would now deal with the motion to be moved by Mr. Charles Mok. We lack a quorum. Chairman, it's not possible to proceed to voting simultaneously at two different rooms. Do you have any suggestions? Can we proceed to the next item first? Can we take a 5-minute break, Chairman? Well, if we take a break, we might not have enough time. Do we have to end by 4:30? No. What about the meeting after 4:30? For the AJLSP meeting, we would have to an item to vote on. There's another meeting in the next room after this meeting. All right, so we would ring the bell after the other meeting. Thank you. After the division bell is rung at another room, well, when the bell ends in the other room, I would start ringing the quorum bell here. Thank you.
而家打 quorum bell 啦，好嘛
？We would now ring the quorum bell.
呢個唔知咩 bell 先。我哋如果呢個係我哋噶嘛，我哋噶係啊，我哋要夠15個人再。
This is the quorum bell for this meeting. We need a quorum of 15. Any member claims a division?
除非有人真係特別要求個 voting bell 先至打 voting bell。
唔係佢就係佢要求啊嘛，而家佢同莫禮光議員兩個要求啊。
佢哋要求記名啫，係咪啊？
呢個 quorum 先。
This is the quorum bell.
係咪有人真係要求明確要求撳 voting bell？
有啊。
冇嘅話咧，想記名
我知
表決咧係。
佢阿周浩鼎要求啊。先嚇。
咁又嘥5分鐘。
係啊，所以我處理唔到第二個唔處理㗎啦。係啊。各位今日咧，我相信下一項
Members, I believe we won't have time to proceed to the next agenda item on voter registration, so we would leave that till the next meeting.
你而家度啊？等夠人先啦，嗬。OK。
真係夠15人嘅時候咧，使唔使問多次？你真係想響投票中啊？如果唔係，我哋而家就電子投票咧都記名㗎啦，都已經係。
好，而家夠15個。好，我哋夠人啦。
We have formed a quorum. So a division will be claimed. The ringing of the voting bell is different from a claim for division.
So
Mr. Mott, you can read out your motion. In light of the rising expectations of the public on protection of personal data privacy, and that the increasing use of data analytics, facial recognition, and internet is bringing more privacy and risk hazards. The panel urges the government to confer on the PCPD powers to carry out criminal investigation and prosecution, and there should also be public consultation on the review of PDPO to collect views from the community on privacy and related issues so that the PDPO can advance with the times and be implemented effectively.
喂，嗱，而家我哋咧將會
So we will vote on whether we would deal with the motion moved by Mr. Charles Mock. So the motion has been tabled.
好。
Please press the attendance button and then press one of the other three buttons to show whether you support or object to the motion or whether you would abstain from voting. Before I declare the voting results, please check your votes. 1, 2, 3. Voting closed. Display of results: 31 present, 15 for, 15 against. So the number of supporting and objecting votes is equal, so it's not a majority of the members are not supporting the motion. So we will not deal with Mr. Charles Mock's motion then. We supposedly should also deal with 2020 voter registration campaign, but in the interest of time, that can't be done. And I noticed that the government will start the campaign in February. And if we discuss that in February, the VR campaign would already have started. So, members, if you have any views on this item, you can write in to the administration to ask your questions, because when we hold our next meeting in February, the campaign would already have started, probably. So if you don't object, then I will discuss with the administration as to how we should deal with this agenda item. So if you have pressing questions to ask, maybe you can write in to the administration to follow up. Any views on this? Ms. Tanya Chan. Chairman, I know that members have spoken a lot about agenda item 1, and I understand why the chairman is dealing with the second item this way. I would only accept this exceptionally here, because when you drew up the agenda, you hope that members can really express their views on the various items. So our views should also be included in the minutes of the meeting. Please consider it. Okay, thank you. So if there is no AOB meeting adjourned today, thank you.